Maeve Caldwell, 28, stared at her parents across the dining table, their words hanging in the air like poison. You can take the guest room. Or move out. The family home she'd returned to after her divorce was suddenly no longer her sanctuary. Her younger sister smirked from the corner. Somehow, in just 3 months, Maeve had become the family outcast, and she was about to discover why. Hey everyone, I can see you're already invested in my story. Before I dive deeper into how my world collapsed that night, I'd love to know where you're watching from. Drop your location in the comments below. If this family betrayal story resonates with you, hit that like button and subscribe to see more real-life drama unfolds. Trust me, what happened next changed everything I thought I knew about blood being thicker than water. 3 months earlier, I had arrived at my childhood home with 2 suitcases and a broken heart. My 3-year marriage to James had ended spectacularly when I discovered he had been having an affair with his coworker. The betrayal cut deep, especially since I had supported him through medical school while putting my own career on hold. The divorce left me financially drained and emotionally exhausted. My parents, Eleanor and Richard Caldwell, had welcomed me with open arms, or so it seemed at the time. Stay as long as you need, Mom had said, hugging me tightly as Dad carried my bags to my old bedroom. The familiar blue walls and window seat overlooking the garden brought a small measure of comfort. Photos of my high school achievements and college graduation still hung proudly on the wall. My younger sister Natalie had seemed supportive at first too. At 25, she had already established herself as a successful marketing executive and owned her own condo downtown. She visited regularly for Sunday dinners and initially offered sympathetic ears and encouragement. You'll get through this, Maeve. You're the strong one in the family, remember? She'd said during one of our late-night conversations on the porch swing. The first few weeks passed in a blur of tears and sleep. I barely left my room except to join family meals where Mom would push second helpings on me while Dad awkwardly tried to cheer me up with stories from his accounting firm. I appreciated their efforts, but couldn't shake the feeling of failure that followed me like a shadow. By week 4, I had started to pull myself together. I updated my resume, began applying for positions in museum curation, my field, before I had set it aside to support James and even started jogging again. The routine helped clear my head, and gradually I felt sparks of my old self returning. That's when I noticed subtle changes in the household dynamics. Mom would sigh heavily whenever I mentioned job applications that weren't local. Dad started making comments about extended guests and empty nest syndrome being reversed. Natalie's visits increased in frequency, and she often arrived early to have private conversations with our parents that abruptly ended when I entered the room. One evening, I came downstairs for a glass of water and overheard my sister's voice in the kitchen. She's just using you as a safety net. You know, she's always been like this, taking advantage of your generosity. My mother's response was too quiet to hear, but my father's wasn't. We're not getting any younger, Eleanor. We had plans. What plans, I wondered, as I silently retreated upstairs. I had always believed my parents wanted nothing more than to have their children close by. By month 2, the atmosphere in the house had become increasingly tense. Mom started forgetting to include me in dinner preparations, a ritual we had always shared. Dad spent more time in his study with the door closed. The guest bedroom at the end of the hall was suddenly being renovated, new paint, new furniture delivered when I was out for interviews. I landed a promising position at a small but prestigious private museum across town. The pay wasn't spectacular, but it was a foot in the door, and I shared the news excitedly at dinner. That's wonderful, honey, Mom said, but her smile didn't reach her eyes. Does this mean you'll be looking for your own place soon? Dad asked immediately. The question stung, but I brushed it off. Eventually, sure. I need to build up some savings first. Natalie visited more frequently as I prepared for my new job. She and Mom spent hours looking at furniture catalogs and paint samples for the guest room. When I asked about this sudden interest in redecorating, Mom waved it off as just time for a refresh. One evening, I returned from a pre-employment orientation to find Natalie's car in the driveway, unusual for a Wednesday. I entered quietly through the side door and heard animated conversation from the living room. "She's finally getting her life together," my sister was saying. "But you need to set a timeline or she'll never leave." "It feels wrong," my mother replied. "After everything with James." "That's exactly why she needs the push," Natalie insisted. "She's using the divorce as an excuse to stagnate." "Trust me, I know my sister." I stood frozen in the hallway, hurt blooming in my chest. Had my sister always seen me this way, as someone who took advantage, who needed to be pushed out? Later that night, I scrolled through Natalie's Instagram feed, something I rarely did since the divorce had made me wary of social media. What I saw made my stomach drop. Photos of Natalie with James. Coffee shops, hiking trails, nothing overtly romantic, but the frequency and familiarity were undeniable. The most recent picture was from just 2 weeks ago. Had my sister been friends with my ex-husband all this time? Why keep it secret? Unless there was something more to hide. I didn't confront her immediately. Instead, I began paying closer attention. Natalie's phone was always face down when she visited. She stepped outside to take calls, and most tellingly, she never mentioned James even when discussions of my divorce came up. As the days passed, the renovation of the guest room continued with increasing urgency. New curtains, a desk, bookshelves installed. It was being prepared for someone, but certainly not for a guest who would stay briefly. My suspicions grew stronger when I accidentally opened mail addressed to my mother, a confirmation for a dinner reservation for 4 at Riverside Terrace, an upscale restaurant downtown. The date was set for the following Friday, our traditional family dinner night. 4 people, Mom, Dad, Natalie, and there who I wasn't aware of any dinner plans, and 4 specifically excluded me. The pieces were starting to fit together in a pattern I didn't want to recognize. The secrecy, the sudden push for me to move on, the guest room renovations, something significant was shifting in my family, and somehow I had become an obstacle to be removed. The first day at my new job at the Westfield Private Collection should have been a turning point, a step toward reclaiming my independence and professional identity. Instead, I found myself distracted, analyzing every interaction with my family over the past months, searching for clues I might have missed. The museum's atmosphere would normally have thrilled me, the hushed reverence of visitors, admiring rare artifacts, the meticulous cataloging systems, even the slightly musty scent of preservation chemicals. My supervisor, Dr. Abernathy, a stern woman with impeccable credentials, seemed impressed by my background despite my career gap. "Your thesis on Victorian mourning jewelry was quite insightful," she noted during our orientation tour. "We have several pieces that could benefit from your expertise." I should have been elated. Instead, I nodded mechanically, my mind still replaying the conversation I'd overheard between Natalie and my parents. When I returned home that evening, I found a small celebration, waiting, a store-bought cake with "Congratulations" written in blue icing and a bottle of champagne. The gesture seemed at odds with the underlying tension of recent weeks. "We're so proud of you, Mom," said, cutting perfect squares of chocolate cake. "This museum position is exactly what you've worked for." Dad raised his glass. "To new beginnings." The phrase hung in the air with unspoken implications. New beginnings. For whom? "Thanks," I said, forcing a smile. "It feels good to be back in my field." "Any interesting colleagues?" Natalie asked with unusual interest. She had stopped by specifically for this impromptu celebration, dressed more formally than a casual family gathering warranted. "It's only been 1 day," I replied, "but everyone seems nice enough." "No potential roommates?" she pressed. "Other young professionals looking to share expenses?" The question was so transparent that I nearly laughed. Are you trying to matchmake me with roommates now? A quick glance passed between her and my parents so fast I almost missed it. Just thinking practically, she shrugged. Museum salaries aren't exactly lavish. I'm aware of my financial situation, thanks, I said, my tone sharper than intended. An uncomfortable silence fell over the table until Mom started chattering about the neighborhood association meeting. The subject was closed, but the message was clear. My family wanted me to move out sooner rather than later. Over the next few weeks, I established a new routine. Workdays at the museum, where I gradually built rapport with colleagues and began a project digitalizing the Victorian jewelry collection. Evenings at home became exercises in careful observation and strategic avoidance. I started noticing other changes. The framed family photos in the living room had been rearranged with several pictures of me mysteriously relegated to less prominent positions. The calendar on the refrigerator showed cryptic entries N+J, dinner and guest room finish that no one explained when I asked casually about weekend plans. One Saturday, I intentionally stayed home when my parents went grocery shopping. This was my chance to investigate without interruption. I felt like an intruder in my own home as I quietly opened the door to the newly renovated guest room. The transformation was striking. The formerly generic space now had distinctive masculine touches: a leather desk chair, dark blue bedding, tech-friendly nightstands with built-in chargers. On the bookshelf stood several medical reference texts. My heart raced as I examined the spines. These weren't just any medical books. They were specific to cardiology, James's specialty. I heard the garage door opening downstairs and quickly exited the room, my mind reeling. Were my parents preparing the guest room for my ex-husband? The idea seemed absurd, yet the evidence pointed increasingly in that direction. At dinner that night, I attempted to broach the subject indirectly. "The guest room looks amazing," I commented casually. "Are we expecting someone to stay?" Mom nearly dropped her fork. "Just preparing for possibilities." "What kind of possibilities require cardiology textbooks?" I asked, watching their faces carefully. Dad cleared his throat. "Those were donations for the hospital fundraiser, just temporarily storing them." The lie was so obvious that I almost called them out immediately. The hospital fundraiser had been 2 months ago. I remembered because it was one of the few events James and I had jointly committed to before our separation. Instead of confronting them directly, I decided to gather more information. The next morning, I called my friend Lauren, who still worked at the hospital with James. "Hey, just checking in," I said, after pleasantries. "How are things at work?" "Busy as always," she replied. "The cardiology department's expansion is keeping everyone on their toes." Expansion. This was news to me. "Yeah, they're bringing in specialists from Chicago. James is pretty excited about it, says it's exactly what he's been waiting for." My stomach tightened. Is he? Barely seeing anyone from work these days, I tried to keep my tone casual. Lauren hesitated. "Maeve, I don't think—" "Please," I interrupted. "I need to know." Another pause. "Not from work, no." "But he has been seeing someone. I thought you knew." Who I pressed, though, I already suspected the answer. I probably shouldn't say anything, but it's been going on for a while with your sister. Even before. Well before things ended with you two. The confirmation hit like a physical blow. Natalie and James hadn't just become friends after our divorce. Their relationship predated it. My sister had been seeing my husband while I was still married to him. How long? My voice sounded strange, distant. At least a year from what I've gathered. "Maeve, I'm so sorry. I thought you must have known by now." After hanging up, I sat motionless on my bed, trying to process this betrayal. Not just from James, I had already accepted his faithlessness, but from Natalie, my own sister. And now it seemed my parents were not only aware of their relationship, but actively facilitating it. The guest room renovations, the secretive conversations, the subtle push for me to establish independence elsewhere, all of it pointed to one conclusion. They were preparing for James to move in, perhaps with Natalie splitting time between her condo and our family home. That evening, I noticed my mother taking unusual care with dinner preparations, her special rosemary roast chicken, homemade rolls, the good china set out. Dad opened an expensive bottle of wine. "What's the occasion?" I asked, leaning against the kitchen counter. "Just felt like making something nice," Mom replied, avoiding eye contact. The doorbell rang at precisely 7:00 p.m. I heard my father greeting someone in the foyer, followed by Natalie's voice, and then unmistakably James's deeper tones. My sister appeared in the kitchen doorway, her expression a mixture of defiance and discomfort. "Maeve," she said, "we need to talk." The dining room fell silent as I entered. James stood awkwardly beside my father, both men shifting uncomfortably as they watched me take in the scene. The table was set for 5. Clearly, I had been included in this dinner as an afterthought, or perhaps as a courtesy that could no longer be avoided. Natalie stepped forward, reaching for my hand. I pulled away instinctively. "Maeve, we wanted to tell you together as a family," she began, her voice steady, despite the tension crackling in the air. "Tell me what I asked, though I already knew the answer. That you've been sleeping with my husband, or is it ex-husband now?" James winced. "Maeve, it's not what you think, really, because I think my sister has been having an affair with you for at least a year, while we were still married." I turned to my parents. "And I think you two have known about it and approved." My mother's face crumpled. "Honey, please sit down. Let's discuss this civilly." Civilly? The word tasted bitter, like secretly renovating the guest room for my ex-husband while pushing me to move out. That kind of civility. My father stepped forward, his expression stern in a way that used to intimidate me as a teenager. "Now, Maeve, you're blowing things out of proportion. We've supported you through your divorce, given you time to get back on your feet." 3 months, I interrupted. After a 3-year marriage that ended because of infidelity. Infidelity with my sister. I looked directly at Natalie. "Tell me I'm wrong." She lifted her chin slightly. "James and I didn't plan this. It just happened. Affairs don't just happen, Natalie. They require deliberate choices, repeated lies." James cleared his throat. "Maeve, I know this is difficult, but Natalie and we have something real. We want to move forward with our relationship, and your parents have been supportive." The betrayal crystallized in that moment, not just the affair, but the family conspiracy surrounding it. My parents hadn't just accepted the relationship, they had embraced it to the point of preparing their home for James while expecting me to quietly vacate. "How long have you all known?" I asked, looking at my parents. My mother glanced at my father before answering. "James came to us about 8 months ago, before he told you about the problems in your marriage. He was very respectful, very concerned about doing the right thing. 8 months. While I was still cooking dinners for James after his hospital shifts, while I was still planning our future together, he had already been discussing his relationship with my sister, with my parents. And you didn't think to tell me, your daughter. We encouraged him to be honest with you," Dad said defensively. "We didn't want to get involved in marital issues." "But you're involved now, aren't you?" I gestured around the dining room. "Hosting dinner parties, renovating rooms. Seems pretty involved to me." Natalie stepped closer. "Maeve, we never meant to hurt you. But James and we're getting married." The words landed like a physical blow. Married. My sister and my ex-husband. When I managed to ask, "Christmas," she replied. "We wanted to give you time to adjust to the idea before we announced it publicly." "How considerate," I said flatly. "And let me guess, the guest room is for when you both stay over for family gatherings, or is James moving in?" My mother intervened. "We thought it would be nice to have a space ready for them when they visit. Natalie will keep her condo and James has his apartment, but family is important to both of them." Family, I repeated the word hollow. Apparently, not all family members are equally important. That's not fair, my father said sharply. We've always treated you girls equally. Equal treatment would have been telling me that my husband was having an affair with my sister. Equal treatment would have been supporting me through betrayal instead of supporting the betrayers. James stepped forward. Maeve, I know I hurt you and I'm sorry for that. But this situation isn't your parents' fault. They were caught in the middle. They chose a side, I replied, and it wasn't mine. My mother began to cry softly. We love both our daughters. We didn't want to lose either of you. So instead, you decided it would be better to lose me, I asked. Because that's what you're doing right now. Natalie's expression hardened. No one is trying to lose you, Maeve, but you can't expect everyone's lives to stop because your marriage ended. James and I love each other. Mom and Dad accept that. Why can't you? The audacity of her question left me momentarily speechless. In her mind, my objection was simply stubbornness, an inability to move on, rather than a legitimate response to profound betrayal. Let me understand this correctly, I said finally. You began an affair with my husband while I was still married to him. You confided in our parents who kept it secret from me. Now you're engaged and expect me to? What? Give you my blessing, attend your wedding. Pretend this is all perfectly normal. We're hoping that with time, James began. Time for what? For me to forget that my entire family conspired behind my back, that the people I trusted most betrayed me in the most fundamental way possible. My father's patience visibly thinned. That's enough drama, Maeve. What's done is done. We're trying to move forward as a family, and you need to decide if you want to be part of that. By taking the guest room or moving out, I clarified, those are my options. An uncomfortable silence confirmed my understanding. We thought my mother said hesitantly that the guest room might be a good transition while you look for your own place. Your old room will eventually become. Well, we're thinking of converting it to a proper home office now that both our girls are grown. The implication was clear. My place in this house and this family was being erased to make room for my sister's new life with my ex-husband. I looked around at their faces, my father's irritation, my mother's tearful pleading, Natalie's defiant righteousness, James's practiced contrition. These people who had once been my entire world now felt like strangers. I don't need the guest room, I said quietly, and I don't need this family. As I turned to leave, Natalie caught my arm. Don't be dramatic, Maeve. Where will you even go? I pulled free from her grasp. Anywhere but here. I spent that night in a haze of betrayal and disbelief, packing essentials into the same 2 suitcases I'd arrived with 3 months earlier. Every family photo I came across felt like a lie, smiling faces hiding secrets, arms around shoulders that would later stab backs. I left them all behind. By morning, I had secured a temporary stay at Lauren's apartment. She had listened in shocked silence as I explained the situation over the phone, then immediately offered her spare room. As long as you need it, she assured me. I can't believe your family would do this. My phone had been buzzing consistently with messages. Since I'd walked out of the dinner, my mother's tearful voicemails, my father's stern texts, demanding we talk this through like adults, and Natalie's messages, alternating between defensive justification and angry accusations about my inability to accept reality. Only James had maintained radio silence, perhaps the one mercy in this nightmare. As I loaded my car, my mother came rushing out of the house in her bathrobe. Maeve, please, she begged, tears streaming down her face. Don't leave like this. We can work this out. I closed the trunk and faced her. Work what out, Mom? The fact that you and Dad chose Natalie and James over me, that you've been planning to replace me in this family while pretending to support me? That's not true, she protested. We love you both equally. Equal love doesn't look like this, I said, gesturing between us. Equal love would have meant warning me about the affair. Equal love would have held Natalie and James accountable instead of rewarding their betrayal. We didn't want to hurt you, so you lied instead. For months. All of you. I opened the driver's door. I need to go. Where Maeve be reasonable. You've just started your job. You don't have savings yet. I'll manage, I said firmly. I've already survived one betrayal this year. What's another? My mother's face crumpled. You're still part of this family. Am I? Because from where I stand, it looks like you've already decided the new family configuration, and it doesn't include me. I drove away with my mother standing in the driveway, her bathrobe fluttering in the morning breeze. In my rearview mirror, I caught a glimpse of Natalie watching from an upstairs window, my old bedroom window. She had already claimed my space. Lauren's apartment was small but welcoming. She had cleared out her home office, setting up a futon and making space in her closet for my things. It's not much, she apologized, but it's yours for as long as you need it. Thank you, I said, the words inadequate for the lifeline she had thrown me. That first day away from my family home was surreal. I called in sick to the museum, unable to face cataloging precious artifacts when my own life had been shattered so thoroughly. Lauren went to work at the hospital, leaving me alone with my thoughts and the constant notifications from my family. Finally, I turned off my phone and curled up on the futon, exhaustion overtaking me. When I woke hours later, the apartment was dark. Lauren had left a note saying she'd taken a night shift to cover for a colleague, and there was pasta in the fridge. I heated it mechanically, eating without tasting my mind, replaying the previous night's revelations on an endless loop. 8 months. My parents had known about James and Natalie for 8 months. While I was still married, still planning a future with a man who had already decided on a future with my sister. The timeline suggested their affair had been going on for at least a year before James finally admitted to cheating, though he had never named Natalie as his mistress. That particular detail I had discovered on my own. Had there been signs I'd missed, Natalie had always admired James, sometimes commenting on how lucky I was to have found such a catch. She had volunteered to drop off dinner at our apartment during his long hospital rotations. Had those been opportunities for them to meet in secret? The thought made me physically ill. My phone, when I finally turned it back on, had 27 missed calls and dozens of messages. I ignored them all except one, a text from an unknown number. Maeve, it's Dr. Abernathy from the museum. Your mother called the front desk concerned when you didn't answer her calls. Please confirm you're all right and when you'll return to work. The audacity of my mother, using my workplace to track me down, ignited a fresh wave of anger. I replied professionally to Dr. Abernathy, apologizing for the family drama, spilling into work, and assuring her I'd be in tomorrow. To my mother, I sent a single text, "I'm safe. Don't contact my workplace again." Her immediate response, "We're worried sick about you," went unanswered. The next day at the museum, I threw myself into work with a focus that bordered on obsession. Dr. Abernathy, to her credit, asked no questions about my absence or the family situation, merely nodding approvingly at my progress with the Victorian jewelry cataloging. "Your attention to detail is exceptional," she noted, examining my documentation of a mourning brooch containing braided hair from a deceased loved one. "You understand the emotional weight these objects carry." I did. More than ever, I understood how objects like relationships could be simultaneously precious and painful. Days passed in a blur of work and restless nights on Lauren's futon. My family continued their campaign of communication, evolving from worried inquiries to increasingly manipulative tactics. My father's messages took on a financial tone. "Your mother and I have always supported you. The least you could do is respond." Natalie alternated between guilt trips and anger, "I never meant to hurt you," followed by, "You're being childish and selfish." My mother simply sent daily variations of, "Please come home. We miss you." After a week, Lauren gently suggested I might need a more permanent living situation. "Not that I'm kicking you out," she assured me, "but you need your own space to heal." She was right. Living on a futon in a friend's apartment was unsustainable, especially with my meager museum salary. I spent evenings scrolling through rental listings, each one confirming what I already knew: affordable housing was scarce, and my financial situation precarious. The solution came from an unexpected source. Dr. Abernathy, noticing me researching apartments during my lunch break, cleared her throat from the doorway of the break room. "Miss Caldwell, forgive the intrusion, but I couldn't help noticing your housing dilemma." I quickly closed the browser tab, embarrassed. "I'm sorry, I shouldn't be doing personal research at work." She waved away my apology. "It's your lunch hour, but as it happens, I might have a proposition that could benefit us both." Dr. Abernathy explained that she owned a small carriage house behind her Victorian home, previously used as a rental for visiting scholars. "It's been vacant since the pandemic reduced our international visitors," she said. "It's modest, but it includes utilities and would be significantly below market rate." "Why would you offer this to me?" I asked, surprised by her generosity. "We've only worked together for a few weeks." "I recognize dedication and integrity when I see it," she replied, matter-of-factly. "And truthfully, having someone trustworthy on the property would be a relief at my age. Consider it a mutually beneficial arrangement." The carriage house was indeed modest, a studio with a kitchenette and small bathroom, but it was clean, charming, and blessedly private. The rent Dr. Abernathy proposed was less than half what I'd expected to pay elsewhere. "There is one condition," she added as she showed me around. "The garden is shared space. I still enjoy my evening constitutional among the roses." I moved in the following weekend, Lauren, helping me transport my meager belongings. For the first time since leaving my parents' home, I felt a glimmer of possibility, a tiny space that was entirely mine, free from the weight of betrayal that had permeated every corner of my childhood home. That evening, sitting on the small porch of the carriage house with a cup of tea, I finally allowed myself to contemplate my future. The pain of my family's betrayal remained acute, but the physical distance had created space for clarity. I had survived my divorce. I would survive this too. My phone buzzed with yet another message from Natalie. "Mom and Dad are talking about coming to your workplace if you don't respond. This silent treatment is hurting everyone." The threat of my family invading the one space where I'd found refuge ignited something in me, not just anger, but resolve. This pattern of emotional manipulation had to end. I dialed my sister's number, my heart pounding. "Maeve," she sounded surprised that her threat had worked. "Finally. Everyone's been so worried. Listen carefully," I interrupted, my voice steadier than I felt. "If anyone from this family comes to my workplace, I will file for a restraining order." "This is not a threat, it's a boundary." "A restraining order, don't be ridiculous." "I'm not being ridiculous. I'm being clear. You, James, and our parents have made your choices. I'm making mine, and my choice is distance from all of you." "For how long?" she demanded. "Are you just going to throw away your family forever because you can't accept that James and I fell in love?" "This isn't about you and James," I said, realizing the truth as I spoke it. "This is about trust, respect, and honesty, all of which this family has shown me is conditional at best, non-existent at worst." "So that's it. You're just cutting us off." "For now, yes. I need space to rebuild my life without the people who helped destroy it." "You're being dramatic. Goodbye, Natalie." I ended the call and blocked her number, then did the same for my parents and James. The immediate silence that followed felt like the first clean breath after emerging from polluted air. Dr. Abernathy found me still sitting on the porch an hour later during her evening garden stroll. She didn't ask about my reddened eyes or the phone clutched in my hand, merely commenting on the early rosebuds and the possibility of rain by morning. As she turned to leave, she paused. "Families are complicated creatures, Miss Caldwell. In my experience, the ones worth keeping are those that help you grow, not those that require you to shrink." With those words hanging in the evening air, she continued her circuit of the garden, leaving me to consider what kind of growth might be possible now that I had removed myself from the shadow of my family's betrayal. Hey everyone, can you believe what my family did? I still can't wrap my head around it sometimes. Have you ever had to completely rebuild your life after a betrayal like this? The next part of my story shows just how deep family secrets can go, and trust me, what I discovered next changed everything. If you're enjoying this family drama journey, hit that like button and subscribe for more real stories about surviving when the people closest to you let you down. I'll be right back with how this story takes an unexpected turn. The carriage house became my sanctuary. In the weeks that followed my decisive break with my family, I established new routines: early mornings in the garden with coffee before heading to the museum, evenings spent either lost in books or slowly furnishing my tiny home with thrift to store finds. Dr. Abernathy, whose first name I learned was Vivian, proved to be an unobtrusive landlady but a surprisingly compatible neighbor. We often shared tea on Sunday afternoons discussing museum acquisitions and restoration techniques. "You have a good eye," she noted one evening as I described my ideas for a new Victorian jewelry exhibition. Many curators understand the historical context but miss the emotional resonance of artifacts. "Objects carry stories," I replied. "Especially personal items like jewelry. They're physical manifestations of human connection." Something shifted in our professional relationship after that conversation. Dr. Abernathy began including me in meetings with board members and donors, introducing me as our promising curator rather than a junior staff member. The vote of confidence boosted my professional standing and gradually my shattered self-esteem. One morning, about a month after moving into the carriage house, I arrived at work to find Dr. Abernathy in an animated discussion with an elegant older woman in the staff area, unusual as visitors typically weren't allowed in our workspace. "Ah, Maeve, Doctor," Abernathy called when she spotted me. Perfect timing. "This is Mrs. Harrington, one of our most generous benefactors. She's considering donating her late husband's collection of medical antiques, and I thought you might provide some insight." Mrs. Harrington extended a hand adorned with an impressive sapphire ring. "Dr. Abernathy speaks highly of your expertise with personal artifacts." I shook her hand, surprised at being consulted on an acquisition outside my specific area. "I'd be happy to help however I can." Over the next hour, Mrs. Harrington described her husband's collection: 19th century surgical tools, apothecary bottles, medical journals, and a particularly valuable set of anatomical teaching models imported from France. As a cardiologist, Dr. Harrington had been fascinated by the evolution of his field. The mention of cardiology sent a familiar pang through me, James's specialty, but I maintained my professional demeanor as we discussed the collection's historical significance. As Mrs. Harrington prepared to leave, she paused. "Forgive me for being forward, but are you by chance related to Dr. James Caldwell?" The question caught me off guard. "He's my ex-husband," I admitted, seeing no reason to lie. Her expression softened with unexpected sympathy. I thought I recognized the name. My husband mentored him briefly before his retirement. She hesitated, then added, "Such a shame about the ethics inquiry." "Ethics inquiry," I repeated, my professional composure slipping. Mrs. Harrington looked uncomfortable. "I assumed you knew. It was all rather hushed up, but my husband was quite disturbed by it. Something about research data manipulation, career-threatening if proven." But apparently it was. Resolved. The way she emphasized the last word suggested the resolution had been less than transparent. After she left, I sat at my desk, mind racing. James had never mentioned any ethics inquiry, and while we'd been married, he had presented his career as an uninterrupted series of achievements and advancements. The timeline would have placed this incident during our marriage around the time he had begun pulling away emotionally, blaming his distance on work pressure. That evening, I did something I'd avoided for weeks. I researched James online, digging beyond the surface-level professional profiles. Nothing obvious appeared in public records, but a passing mention in a medical journal's letters section caught my attention. A vague reference to recent controversies in cardiology research at Westlake Hospital, James's workplace, with dates that aligned with Mrs. Harrington's story. I hesitated before calling Lauren. We'd maintained contact since I'd moved out, but I'd avoided discussing anything related to James or my family. "I need to ask you something about James," I said when she answered. "And I need complete honesty." Lauren's pause spoke volumes. "This is about the research thing, isn't it? So there was something—" "An ethics inquiry," she sighed heavily. "I wasn't directly involved, but yes. About 2 years ago, there were serious questions about data in one of his major studies. The results were too perfect, statistically improbable. An investigation was launched." What happened? Suddenly it all went away. Rumors said someone with connections made it disappear, someone with substantial influence over the hospital board. The investigation was dropped, James got his promotion, and everyone pretended it never happened. The timing aligned perfectly with my father's appointment to the hospital's finance committee, a position he had described as just community service, despite the significant time commitment. My father, with his accounting firm's connections to several hospital board members and major donors. Lauren, who else knew about this inquiry? Another hesitation. Most of the cardiology department at least heard rumors. Anyone closely connected to hospital administration or the research division would have known details, including Natalie, whose marketing firm handled several hospital fundraising events. She would have had access to insider gossip, if not concrete information. Pieces began falling into place with sickening clarity. My family's sudden embrace of James, despite his betrayal. The secretive conversations. The accelerated timeline of acceptance and integration. What had first appeared to be merely a personal betrayal now showed signs of something more calculated. Had my father intervened to save James's career in exchange for some arrangement? Had Natalie leveraged knowledge of the ethics violation to advance her relationship with James? The possibility that my family's betrayal extended beyond emotional harm into something approaching blackmail or professional manipulation added a new dimension of horror to an already painful situation. The next day, I requested access to the museum's archived medical journals, ostensibly for background research on Mrs. Harrington's collection. Hours of careful reading yielded subtle references to controversial research methodologies, and withdrawn papers, nothing explicitly naming James, but enough to confirm that something significant had been covered up. I needed more concrete evidence before confronting anyone with these suspicions. Fortunately, my position at the museum had connected me with researchers and academics across various institutions. Under the guise of professional networking, I reached out to a medical historian who specialized in research ethics. Dr. Lenora Kim responded with unexpected eagerness to my vague inquiry about historical parallels to modern research controversies. Fascinating timing, her email noted. I'm currently documenting several recent cases for an upcoming publication on institutional responses to scientific misconduct. Perhaps we could discuss over coffee. We met at a quiet cafe near the university where she taught. Dr. Kim, a petite woman with penetrating eyes behind stylish glasses, wasted no time on pleasantries. Your email suggested particular interest in cardiology research ethics breaches, she said as soon as we were seated. Any specific case study in mind, I hesitated, then decided on directness. Westlake Hospital approximately 2 years ago. A case that was opened and then suddenly closed without public resolution. Her eyebrows rose. The Caldwell study? Interesting. She studied me more carefully. You share the name. Relation ex-husband, I admitted. I recently learned about issues that occurred during our marriage, issues that were kept from me. Dr. Kim's expression softened slightly. I see. Well, the Caldwell case is noteworthy precisely because of its unusual resolution. Most ethics violations either result in cleared names or career-ending consequences. This one simply evaporated. Do you know why? She leaned forward. Officially, insufficient evidence to proceed. Unofficially, significant pressure from hospital donors and board members. The kind of pressure that comes with financial implications. Like someone with connections to the hospital's finance committee, I suggested. Dr. Kim's eyes narrowed. You have specific knowledge? Suspicions, I corrected. My father joined the finance committee around that time. He's an accountant with connections to several board members. She tapped her fingers thoughtfully on the table. Family interventions in professional misconduct cases are rare, but not unprecedented. Usually, they're motivated by more than just protecting a loved one's career. What do you mean? People don't risk their own professional reputations without substantial motivation. Financial gain, professional advancement, sometimes leverage for future needs. Covering up research fraud creates mutual vulnerability. Everyone involved has something to lose if the truth emerges. The implications were disturbing. Had my father risked his own professional standing to protect James? If so, what was he getting in return beyond a son-in-law who had already betrayed his daughter? As if reading my thoughts, Dr. Kim added, the Caldwell study, had it been legitimately successful, would have positioned the researcher for a significant career advancement. Leadership roles, speaking engagements, possibly pharmaceutical partnerships worth millions. Millions that would benefit not just James, but anyone financially connected to him, like family members who might share in his success either directly or through enhanced social status and connections. I left the meeting with Dr. Kim with more questions than answers, but a growing certainty that the betrayal I had experienced went beyond personal relationships into a calculated network of professional and financial arrangements. That evening, as I sorted through the last box of belongings I'd brought from my parents' home, I found my mother's birthday card from the previous year. Inside was a handwritten note. To my wonderful daughter, may this year bring you and James all the success and recognition you both deserve. Your future is so bright. The timing of the card coincided perfectly with the period when the ethics inquiry would have been underway. Had my mother already known then what was happening? Had my entire family been anticipating the professional advancement that would come from the fraudulent research, seeing me as merely the convenient connection to James's rising star? The thought that my family might have seen me primarily as a link to James's career, rather than as a daughter or sister worthy of loyalty in my own right, cut deeper than the affair itself. 2 months had passed since the disastrous family dinner, when an opportunity for clarity arrived unexpectedly. The museum received notice that a major hospital fundraising gala would be held in our grand hall, an event Natalie's marketing firm was coordinating, and one that would inevitably include James as a department head, as well as my parents as committee members. Dr. Abernathy approached me with obvious discomfort. Maeve, I've just been informed of the guest list for the hospital fundraiser. Given your personal situation, I wanted to offer you the option to take leave that evening. I appreciated her consideration, but felt a sudden clarity. Actually, I'd prefer to work the event. As a professional curator representing the museum. She studied me with concern. Are you certain no one would question your absence? I'm certain, I replied with more confidence than I felt. It's time I faced them on my terms in my professional environment. The night of the gala, I dressed with particular care. A sophisticated black dress that conveyed both professional authority and quiet elegance. Doctor, Abernathy had assigned me to oversee the Victorian medical instruments display that would complement the fundraiser's historical theme, positioning me in a visible but official capacity. As guests began arriving, I maintained my composure, discussing the exhibits with interested donors and board members. From my position, I could observe the entire hall without being immediately noticeable, a perfect vantage point to watch my family's arrival. My parents entered first, my father resplendent in his tuxedo, my mother elegant in midnight blue. They moved with practiced ease through the crowd, my father immediately engaging with hospital board members, while my mother charmed donors' wives. Neither looked in my direction, unaware of my presence. Natalie arrived shortly after, stunning in a designer gown that screamed success and confidence. James accompanied her, his hand possessively at the small of her back as they worked the room as a power couple. The diamond on her left hand caught the light, the engagement ring that would have been unaffordable on a normal doctor's salary without substantial family support or anticipated career advancement. I remained at my post professional and poised, waiting for the inevitable moment of discovery. It came when Dr. Abernathy intentionally guided a major donor toward my display, deliberately introducing me by my full name within earshot of my mother. Miss Maeve Caldwell is our specialist in personal artifacts and medical antiquities, she announced. Her insights on the psychological significance of these objects are quite remarkable. My mother froze mid-conversation, her champagne glass halting halfway to her lips. Our eyes met across the room. I nodded slightly, a professional acknowledgement and nothing more before returning my attention to the donors' questions. Within minutes, my family had been alerted to my presence. I could feel their glances, the whispered consultations, the strategic repositioning around the room. I continued my work, unperturbed, a model of professional focus. Eventually, my father approached, maintaining a public smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Maeve," he said quietly, "we had no idea you would be here." "I work here," I replied simply. "This is a museum event." "Your mother is quite upset. It's been months without a word from you." "I've been busy establishing my career," I said, echoing the pragmatic tone he had always valued, focusing on my professional advancement. Something in my phrasing caught his attention. "Yes, well, family should remain a priority, despite career ambitions." "Should it? That hasn't been my recent experience with family priorities." Before he could respond, a distinguished older gentleman approached my display. "Richard Caldwell, didn't expect to see you at the medical artifacts." "More of a numbers man, aren't you?" My father shifted smoothly into networking mode. "Dr. Harrington, good to see you. Actually, the curator here is my daughter Maeve." Dr. Harrington, Mrs. Harrington's husband, the retired cardiologist, looked at me with new interest. "Ah, Mrs. Harrington mentioned meeting you." "Small world indeed." "Increasingly small," I agreed. "Dr. Harrington, I've been fascinated by what your wife shared about your collection, particularly the historical context of cardiac research ethics." My father's smile tightened almost imperceptibly. "Dr. Harrington nodded enthusiastically. "Ethics in medical research has been a particular interest of mine since retirement. In fact, I've been consulting on the hospital's new ethics committee, a necessary development after some unfortunate incidents in recent years." "How interesting," I said, watching my father from the corner of my eye. "I'd love to hear more about those incidents and how the committee is addressing them." My father intervened smoothly. "Perhaps not the most appropriate topic for a gala, doctor. Maeve, your mother would love to say hello. If you'll excuse us, Dr. Harrington." As he guided me away with a firm hand on my elbow, I caught Dr. Harrington's puzzled expression. Once we were relatively private, my father's pleasant facade dropped. "What are you playing at, Maeve? This event is important for the hospital, for all of us." "All of you, you mean," I corrected. "I'm simply doing my job. Your questions about ethics committees and incidents, are you trying to create problems?" I met his gaze steadily. I'm pursuing truth, Dad. Something this family seems to have abandoned. His expression hardened. Be very careful, Maeve. You don't understand what's at stake, don't I? 2 years ago, James faced an ethics inquiry that threatened his career. Mysteriously, it disappeared around the time you joined the hospital's finance committee. Now he's engaged to Natalie on track for department leadership, and you're all celebrating this arrangement while pushing me aside. The blood drained from my father's face. You've been digging into things that don't concern you. Things that don't concern me. My husband's professional misconduct during our marriage, my family's apparent collusion to cover it up. How exactly are those things not my concern? Before he could respond, James appeared at his shoulder, his expression a careful mask of professional cordiality for any observing guests. Richard, the hospital director, is looking for you, he said before acknowledging me with a curt nod. Maeve, unexpected to see you here. Apparently, I replied coolly. Though, as I've been explaining to Dad, my presence shouldn't be nearly as surprising as finding out my ex-husband's ethics violation was covered up by my family. James's professional mask slipped momentarily. You don't know what you're talking about. Don't I data manipulation in research findings? An investigation that mysteriously disappeared. A subsequent promotion that should have been impossible under the cloud of suspicion. A convenient engagement to the daughter of a man with financial connections to the hospital board. My father placed a warning hand on James's arm as he began to respond angrily. Not here, he muttered. Too many ears. Concerned about appearances? I asked. How ironic, given what you've all been hiding. My mother and Natalie had now joined our tense circle, creating what must have appeared to outsiders as a family reunion in the corner of the gala. My mother reached for my hand, which I subtly withdrew. Maeve, darling, we've missed you so, she said, her voice trembling slightly. Why didn't you tell us you were working tonight? Would it have mattered? I asked. You all made your priorities clear months ago. Natalie's eyes narrowed. Still playing the victim, I see. While you've been nursing your grievances, the rest of us have been moving forward with our lives. Moving forward? Built on what foundation exactly? I asked. A covered-up ethics violation. A convenient engagement that secured James's position. Tell me, Natalie, did you know about the inquiry when you started sleeping with my husband? Or was that just a happy discovery that gave you leverage? Her expression confirmed my suspicions before she could compose herself. You don't know anything about my relationship with James. I know enough, I replied. I know that around the time his research was questioned, you suddenly had special access to hospital events through your marketing firm. I know Dad joined the finance committee and developed close relationships with board members who could influence the inquiry. I know that after the investigation mysteriously disappeared, James received a promotion that put him on track for department leadership. James stepped closer, his voice low and threatening. You're creating conspiracy theories to soothe your wounded ego, Maeve. Let it go before you embarrass yourself further. MI Dr. Harrington seems quite interested in historical ethics breaches at Westlake Hospital. I wonder what he might share if asked directly about your case specifically. My father's hand clamped on my arm. Enough. This is neither the time nor place. I removed his hand deliberately. There never seems to be an appropriate time for truth in this family. But rest assured, I'm no longer playing by your rules. My mother began to cry softly, attracting concerned glances from nearby guests. Please, Maeve, we're family. Whatever mistakes we've made, family, I repeated. You stopped being my family the moment you chose to protect James's career and Natalie's ambitions over honesty and basic respect for me. Doctor. Abernathy appeared at my side, her timing impeccable. Excuse me, miss. Caldwell. But the museum director is asking for your assistance with a donor question about the medical artifacts. The interruption provided the perfect exit. I nodded professionally to my stunned family. If you'll excuse me, my professional responsibilities take precedence." As I walked away, I heard Natalie's urgent whisper to my father, "What exactly does she know?" His response was too quiet to hear, but his expression of controlled panic told me everything I needed to know. The careful edifice they had built was beginning to crack. The remainder of the evening, I maintained professional distance, observing my family's increasingly agitated consultations from across the room. My father repeatedly checked his phone, making brief calls in the hallway. My mother kept glancing anxiously in my direction. Natalie and James left earlier than expected, their departure hasty and unannounced. When the last guests had departed, Dr. Abernathy found me carefully returning artifacts to their secure cases. That, she said mildly, appeared to be quite a family reunion. I managed a small smile. More of a reconnaissance mission. She nodded thoughtfully. Your father made several calls to the hospital board chairman before leaving, quite urgently from what I observed. Did he? I wasn't surprised, but the confirmation was satisfying. Maeve, she said carefully, I don't know the details of your family situation, but I recognize the dynamics of power and secrets being protected. Whatever you're dealing with, proceed with caution but conviction. Thank you, I said, genuinely moved by her perceptiveness and support. For everything. The next morning, I received an unexpected email from Dr. Harrington requesting a private meeting to discuss mutual research interests in medical ethics. My confrontation at the gala had clearly sparked his curiosity. By that afternoon, my phone was flooded with messages from my family, demands for meetings, threats about damaging reputations, pleas to discuss misunderstandings. I ignored them all, focusing instead on gathering documentation for my meeting with Dr. Harrington. The reckoning I had set in motion was accelerating beyond my family's ability to control it. For the first time since discovering their betrayal, I felt a sense of power returning not from vengeance, but from truth finally emerging into the light. 1 week after the gala, the carefully constructed facade my family had built collapsed spectacularly. Dr. Harrington, disturbed by our conversation and his own suspicions, had taken his concerns directly to the hospital board's ethics committee. An official investigation was reopened into James's research, this time with external oversight that couldn't be influenced by local connections. I learned about these developments not from my family, but from Lauren, who called me during her lunch break at the hospital. Maeve, the entire cardiology department is in chaos, she said, her voice hushed despite her private location. James has been placed on administrative leave pending a full investigation. There are rumors the original ethics inquiry was improperly dismissed due to external pressure. Your father's name keeps coming up in conversations. The news brought a complex mixture of emotions, vindication, but also sadness that my suspicions had been confirmed so thoroughly. 3 days later, the local medical journal published a brief announcement. The hospital was reviewing all research from the cardiology department from the past 5 years, with particular focus on studies led by Dr. James Caldwell. The same day, my father's accounting firm issued a statement that Richard Caldwell was taking a leave of absence from his position on the hospital's finance committee to avoid any appearance of conflict of interest. The professional fallout was swift and merciless. James's promising career trajectory halted abruptly. My father's reputation among hospital board members, carefully cultivated over years, was now tainted by whispers of improper influence. Natalie's marketing firm lost its contract with the hospital's fundraising division. I observed these developments from a distance, neither participating in nor celebrating their downfall. The truth had emerged, not through my vengeful actions, but through their own choices finally facing scrutiny. On a crisp autumn morning, almost 6 months after the fateful family dinner that had begun this journey, I received a letter from my mother. Unlike the desperate texts and calls I had ignored, this was a handwritten note on her personal stationery. Maeve, it began simply, I have failed you as a mother in ways I am only beginning to understand. When your father first suggested helping James with his misunderstanding at the hospital, I told myself we were protecting both our daughters' futures. I convinced myself that your marriage was already troubled, that Natalie's happiness shouldn't be sacrificed for a relationship that was ending anyway. I was wrong in ways I cannot fully express. If you are willing, I would like to meet, not to ask forgiveness, which I have not earned, but to acknowledge the truth of what we did. With regret and love, Mom. The letter's honesty, coming after months of manipulative attempts at reconciliation, gave me pause. After careful consideration, I agreed to meet her at a neutral location, a quiet tea room downtown. She arrived looking older than I remembered, the confident socialite replaced by a woman visibly carrying the weight of consequences. We ordered tea in awkward silence before she finally spoke. "Your father and I are separating," she said quietly. "After 32 years of marriage." I hadn't expected this. "I'm sorry," I said automatically, then wondered if I truly meant it. "Don't be. It's been a long time coming." She stirred her tea without drinking it. "What happened with you and James and Natalie?" It forced me to see patterns I've been ignoring for decades. Your father's emphasis on appearances, connections, status, how he taught Natalie to value those same things while pushing you to be practical, supportive. You noticed that I asked, surprised by her insight. Only in retrospect, she admitted. Richard saw James as an investment in the family's social advancement. A respected doctor with leadership potential who would elevate our standing. When the ethics issue emerged, he viewed it as a threat to that investment. Using his influence to make it disappear seemed justified to protect what he'd cultivated. And Natalie's relationship with James, my mother's face crumpled slightly. I told myself they had genuine feelings that had developed unfortunately, but looking back, Natalie always wanted what would impress her father. James, once his career was saved by your father, became the perfect alliance. I don't think she planned it initially, but she recognized the opportunity. "And you went along with all of it," I said, not accusingly, but seeking understanding. "I've spent my entire adult life going along," she replied with unexpected candor. "Supporting your father's ambitions, maintaining the image of the perfect family. By the time I recognized what we were doing to you, the momentum was too powerful to stop." We talked for nearly 2 hours, the most honest conversation we'd ever had. She didn't ask for reconciliation or forgiveness, merely offered truth as a first step toward whatever might come next. As for my father and Natalie, the professional consequences of their actions forced confrontations with realities they had long avoided. My father's accounting firm placed him on indefinite leave after clients began questioning his ethical judgment. Natalie's engagement ended when James, facing potential career ruin, decided she was no longer a beneficial alliance. I maintained my distance from both of them, focusing instead on building my own life. The Victorian jewelry exhibition I had curated opened to critical acclaim, establishing my professional reputation independent of family connections. Dr. Abernathy began discussions about a succession plan that would position me for curatorial leadership in the coming years. My tiny carriage house gradually transformed into a true home, filled with carefully chosen objects that reflected my emerging sense of self. On my 30th birthday, I hosted a small gathering of new friends and colleagues, people who knew me for my work and character rather than family associations. When Lauren asked if I ever regretted the way things had unfolded, I considered carefully before answering. I regret that it took such a complete betrayal to show me the truth. I said finally, but I don't regret discovering who my family really was or who I could be without them. 6 months later, I received a formal letter from the Hospital Ethics Committee requesting my testimony regarding the circumstances surrounding the original investigation into James's research. My decision was immediate and clear. I would tell the complete truth, regardless of the consequences for my family members. The reckoning that followed was not about revenge, but accountability, the natural result of choices made by people who had prioritized advancement over integrity, appearances over truth, and self-interest over family loyalty. As for me, I discovered that sometimes the guest room or moving out entirely is not an ultimatum, but an opportunity to find where you truly belong. Thank you all for following my story of family betrayal and personal redemption. If you've ever experienced a moment when standing up for yourself meant standing alone, I'd love to hear about it in the comments below. Sometimes life's hardest lessons teach us who we really are and who deserves a place in our lives. If this journey resonated with you, please hit that like button, subscribe to my channel for more authentic life stories, and share this with someone who might need to hear that it's okay to choose yourself when others won't. Thank you for being here with me. Your support means everything as I continue to build a life on my own terms.